Welcome to On Strike. I'm Kshama Sawant. Today, we're very lucky to be joined in the studio by left independent, anti-war, pro-worker presidential candidate Jill Stein. We're recording this while Jill Stein is in Seattle to stand with the Boeing machinists who are on strike after getting a shameful sellout contract offer from the company's executives. And this comes in the context of the Washington state Democrats having completely sold out the machinists 10 years ago, gutting their pensions and giving Boeing executives the single largest corporate handout in US history. In fact, Jill and her campaign and Worker Strike Back members and I just got back from visiting the picket line. We heard from the machinists about how the contract offer was an insult and that they're angry and ready to fight. We're not cowering, as one of the machinists said on the picket line. On Strike has interviewed Jill Stein previously, including our interview back in May when she was among the more than 80 protesters arrested at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, as the anti-war protests were starting to sweep the entire nation and were facing down the repression from campus administrations and the police. If you haven't already, use the link below to watch that special conversation with Jill Stein at the University of Missouri in Kansas City, interviewed by Matt Malloy, a member of Worker Strike Back. And before we continue, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. If you've been watching On Strike, you know that we bring coverage, political analysis, and strategy for the working class of the kind you simply won't find in the mainstream media. Become a member of Worker Strike Back to help ensure we can continue to build our movement against the bosses and their political servants, and so that On Strike can continue to bring the kind of discussions about strategy needed to fight back and win. We don't run any ads, we don't accept any corporate money, and we rely entirely on donations from working people. Go to workersstrikeback.org and click on Become a Member. At our inaugural national Zoom conference in July, Worker Strike Back held a democratic discussion and vote on the US presidential election, and we're proud to have endorsed Jill Stein's campaign. In our view, at this moment, organizing against the genocidal war on Gaza has to mean taking a stand against genocide in the US presidential election, which, as the Abandoned Harris movement has said, has to mean rejecting both the warmongering candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and their genocidal warmongering parties, the Democrats and Republicans. This comes on top of the fact that the Biden-Harris administration and the Democratic Party have completely sold out working people. They broke the railroad workers' strike, and they broke their promises on the $15 an hour minimum wage and canceling student debt. The Biden-Harris administration ended the child tax credit expansion, plunging millions of families with young children back into poverty. We need the strongest possible vote for a left anti-war alternative in this election now, as a step towards building a new party. That alternative is Jill Stein. Jill is running a principled campaign fighting to end the genocidal war on Gaza, an end to US military funding to the Israeli state, and an end to the occupation. Jill is also fighting for Medicare for all, $25 an hour minimum wage, canceling student debt, making college free for all. Jill is now polling ahead of both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump among Arab American and Muslim voters in the key swing states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona. A poll conducted by the Council on American Islamic Relations in Michigan showed Stein with a stunning 40% support among Muslim voters compared to just 12% for Harris and 18% for Trump. Earlier this month, Stein spoke at ArabCon, an annual 4-day gathering of Arab Americans organized by the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, or ADC. Usually, the convention is held in Washington, D.C., but this year the organizers chose Dearborn, Michigan, the city with the highest percentage of Arab American residents in the U.S. Dearborn voters made headlines during the Democratic primaries for choosing uncommitted over Biden, the party's candidate at the time, on the basis of opposition to his support for the genocidal war on Gaza. Despite initial efforts to deflect the anger of the anti-war community with cynical claims to support a ceasefire and that she feels sympathy for the plight of the Palestinians, Harris quickly solidified her position as unequivocally backing Israel in the conflict, and alongside Biden has overseen the passage of an additional $23 billion in weapons to the Israeli military. She has since doubled down on her warmongering position including by pledging to maintain America's status as the most lethal military in the world, a truly horrifying statement in the context of the constant flood of headlines announcing new war crimes and mass civilian casualties in Gaza, the West Bank, and more recently in Lebanon. Last week, in an interview that went viral with New York based radio program The Breakfast Club, Jill stated, "Every vote cast for our campaign is a vote against genocide." Workers Strike Back strongly agrees with this statement and has committed to fight for every possible vote for Jill Stein and against both warmongering candidates, Harris and Trump, including as a step towards a mass organizing conference in February. We're also really excited to announce that Workers Strike Back will be hosting two extremely important rallies alongside the Jill Stein campaign and Abandon Harris. The first on Sunday, October 6th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time in Dearborn, Michigan, where we'll also be joined by Hassan Abdul Salam, the co-founder of Abandon Harris. And the second on Tuesday, October 15th at 5 p.m. Pacific in Seattle. We're excited to have Jill back with us at On Strike, particularly now as our campaign is gaining crucial momentum in key swing states and with Arab American and Muslim voters across the country. Welcome to On Strike, Jill.
Really great to be here, Kshama. Thanks
Great
so
to have
much.
you and great to be on the picket line alongside you.
That was so exciting.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll talk more about that. You've had an exciting time in the recent weeks. You had this poll from the ADC and the Council on American Islamic Relations showing your rising profile among and support among Arab and Muslim voters as a whole, especially the statistics from the key swing states. You attended ArabCon. And I think you're also now winning some key victories against the Democrats who are trying to deny you from being on the ballot. You want to talk about how things are going?
Yes, and I should add to that mix this appearance on the Breakfast Club, which was really our first big introduction by way of substantial media in the African American community. And there too, the reception has really been off the charts. And I think, for the Democrats, this has been, kind of a double whammy, maybe a triple whammy. They're absolutely terrified that they have a competitor, that there is an independent political campaign on behalf of working people, on behalf of people who oppose genocide, a pro-worker, anti-war, climate emergency, really urgent campaign that is on the ballot across the country, and we are starting to really get attention. We've begun to break through, which was really sort of our strategy all along, that we were just going to put our heads down and work on getting on the ballot. And generally that has succeeded. The Democrats are trying to kick us off the ballot. They've taken us to court in 4 states, and it's looking like we're going to win all 4 of them. We've won in 3 out of 4, basically. We won in Wisconsin, we won in Georgia, we won in New Hampshire, where they couldn't get past the Election Commission even, who threw the case out. And we're now taking the case in Nevada up to the Supreme Court.
And they really fought you in Nevada.
Oh, they did. We got 3 times the number of required signatures, 30,000 people who signed petitions in Nevada saying they wanted to have an anti-genocide, anti-war, pro-worker campaign on the ballot. And we were actually put on the ballot by the Election Commission, and then the Democratic Party basically took the Election Commission and our campaign to court in order to throw us off. And they kind of went on a fishing expedition looking for a reason, which is kind of what they're doing in all of these states. They're sort of taking us to court on mostly trivial and unsubstantial reasons. So in Nevada, and
really undemocratic practices by the so-called Democratic Party.
Well, yes, we have renamed them the Anti-Democratic Party. They're not just
I think
undemocratic.
That's more accurate.
Yes, exactly. So we prevailed against the Democratic Party in the district court, and then they appealed it. And it turned out the court to which they appealed it was primarily Republicans by virtue of their campaign donations. You could see what their allegiances were. And they basically threw out our petition on extremely ludicrous, outrageous grounds. We had originally used the correct form. The election commission in Nevada said, no, that's the wrong form. It's obsolete. You've got to use this form. Well, they made a mistake. And basically the Democratic Party said, it may have been their mistake, but hey, you're off the ballot. And the difference in the forms had to do with a footnote affirming that the petition collector had actually ensured that people were signing in their proper districts. Something that's done really routinely by petitioners anyhow, and the district court said that just doesn't hold water. That's not a reason to invalidate these petitions because the petitioners are doing that anyhow. And besides, the party did the right thing, and it was the election commission that missed the ball here for whatever significance that had. So at any rate, they threw it out. The appeals court threw it out on this very trivial, basis of lawfare. This is the use of the legal system against the spirit of the law, using details of the law.
I mean, it really shows that all the institutions of capitalism, the courts, all of these offices, the state offices, they're all stacked up against working people, against any effort by the working class to have alternatives to the Democrats and Republicans.
Yes, and this is where the money comes in too, because the Democrats had announced way back in March that they were hiring a, quote, army of corporate lawyers to basically practice this lawfare. And that's what they were doing in Nevada too. So we then took the case to the Supreme Court.
And you mentioned Wisconsin as one of the states where you were able to prevail on the ballot despite all the attempts by the Democrats. And if you can talk about why Wisconsin and Michigan are, and especially Michigan, but why these states are so crucial. Why are the Democrats going to all lengths and to engaging in such anti-democratic practices to get you off the ballot?
Yes. So the 4 states that they've gone after are all swing states, and they're very nervous that we will beat them in the swing states. And in particular, when they've seen the response of the Muslim American community and the Arab American community to having an anti-genocide candidate, which is what is such a red line for so many people in this election. The Democrats are completely freaking out. So they've really doubled down in trying to throw us off the ballot on these swing states. And the truth is, in 3 of these swing states where actually we are beating Kamala Harris, the Democrats cannot win. They cannot win without the vote of the Muslim American community, to which we say, okay, so if you want to win their vote, then, implement a weapons embargo right now. You could win their vote. You could win their, do it, do it. People need choices. Why try to slam people's choices?
Really, and
do the right thing.
Exactly, and it's exactly like abandoned Harris activists have said, that if you are going to be a purveyor of a genocidal war, then you are going to suffer the consequences, electoral consequences, which you deserve to. And so if Harris is defeated in any state, it's not at the doorstep of those who voted against her because they're voting against a genocidal candidate and party. It's at the doorstep of that party and candidate that is continuing to ship weapons. And this has happened under her watch. It's not like she's been an innocent bystander, and she has, as I was saying in the introduction, doubled down on all of this. And since she was anointed as candidate, actually, the big $20 billion shipment was approved, which is actually, it's also just shows the far-reaching goals of capitalism and imperialism that is meant to ship arms and weapons to the Israeli state over many years. So this is a long-term plan, and of course we know it goes back to 75 years of occupation, all of that.
Yes. And in addition, the Democrats refused to allow a loyal Democratic office holder, in fact, a Muslim American office holder, I think a state rep, to have 2 minutes of time at the Democratic nominating convention simply to acknowledge and recognize the plight of the Palestinian people. They could not allow that.
Representative from Georgia?
They had refused to allow her stage time.
Although I have to say, just because we're talking about this, I don't agree with her statements that she is nonetheless supporting Kamala Harris. And I think that's the problem. And that is actually a real abdication of leadership
I agree
and moral
completely.
and political responsibility at this
Yes,
moment.
I agree completely. But it speaks volumes
It
that the
does.
Democratic Party could not even
not
allow
even.
2 minutes from someone who was
It's
even
someone who's
going to
supporting,
vote
yes,
for Harris
exactly.
anyhow.
Yes.
That they could not
Yes.
acknowledge, the genocide that they're committing. And
Yeah,
it
but
becomes more outrageous by the day
it does.
what Israel
It
is
also
doing.
shows, yeah, it's outrageous, and it also shows that for the Democratic Party, and obviously it's not just about Harris, it's about the Democratic establishment as a whole, for them
Oh, yeah.
to allow even that degree of acknowledgement about the genocide and about the slaughter of the Palestinians on the stage of the Democratic National Convention, even from a representative who is very strongly cheerleading Kamala Harris, that's a threat to their whole agenda, because once you do that, if you're the Democratic elite and you allow that presentation to happen, even as mild as it might be, it calls into question, okay, then why is this party supporting this genocide? How can this even be
Absolutely.
happening? And so
Yes.
for them, there is no way out but to really have a complete rejection of anything pro-Palestinian.
Yes.
But I think it was an important step that those activists asked for that space, because then the Democratic Party got much more exposed, because they were
Sure
not even
did.
willing to do that.
Yes, and when other anti-genocide, pro-Palestinian activists then resorted to simply reading the names of people who've been murdered in Gaza outside of the convention, the Democratic delegates were walking by with hands on their
I
ears.
saw that footage. It's astounding.
It
It's
really
just
speaks
astounding.
volumes about what was going on there. They were trying to have an ode to joy. They wanted to talk about joy and to celebrate in the face of this, this incredible genocide that they are committing.
Yeah, actually, it's not like it's happening despite them
Yes,
raising their voice.
right.
They're actually
doing it.
Yeah,
Yes.
without U.S. imperialism's
Right.
ongoing and lavish support of the Israeli state, the occupation in the first place couldn't have happened, and not to mention this ongoing genocide right now
It
couldn't have
shuts
happened.
down
Yeah.
absolutely in a minute. The second the White House decides it's over, it's over. In many ways, this is not Israel's war. This is really the U.S. war.
It is the
and
war
Israel
of
is kind of
Western
the
imperialism.
proxy.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
especially potent at this moment when you have the U.S.-led bloc versus the China-led bloc in this new, what for many months was called the new Cold War, but really it's breaking out into hot wars. You're seeing it happen, in the Ukraine region, and also now the genocide against the Palestinians. Obviously, there are long histories to all these wars. And those histories are also deeply embedded in the logic of capitalism and imperialism. I wanted to ask you your views also on what we just heard recently, where after the Israeli aggression began in full force and unfolded into what has become now a genocidal war, you saw during the presidential primaries the uncommitted effort and also abandoned Biden being launched. And they both united in calling for an uncommitted vote in the primary, which in my view, it's a historic development that happened,
Yes.
where just millions of voters are saying that we are either not voting, or as 500,000 voters did, that they actually cast their ballot as uncommitted. That was important. But now we see abandoned Biden relaunching itself as abandoned Harris, which I think again is a doubly historic development.
It's incredible.
Where they're saying we're absolutely not going to cross this red line of genocide. And also, as Hassan, as you and I were speaking at the Worker Strike Back rally at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and
Yes.
Hassan said that we need to punish the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris, and defeating her in Michigan is a crucial component of that. But then now you see the uncommitted leaders, they released a statement where they say that they're not going to vote for Harris, but they're also saying that third-party campaigns like Jill Stein, which is actually an anti-war, anti-genocide campaign, should not get the votes either, which in my view is like saying like a backdoor for vote for Harris, but except not saying Harris. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, to me, this is just typical Democratic Party influence peddling, from within. And there's been a lot of pressure put on the Muslim American community, especially on certain elements of it, to basically be apologists for the Democratic Party and for Kamala Harris. And, this is not unexpected at all. My understanding, actually, is that it was the Abandon Biden movement that was a true grassroots movement and a real expression of the of the moral imperative of the Muslim American community. And once that was out of the bag and launched, then there came this kind of pushback in the form of the Uncommitted campaign, which was an effort to kind of hijack and divert and to kind of combat from within this impulse to break away. So, it's not unusual to see that. It's really unfortunate, but I think the overwhelming sentiment of the community is unbelievably
you can see it in the polls.
inspirational, and it's courageous, yes. And, this is nothing new, to see privileged leadership kind of clinging to power and clinging to the trappings of power and the status quo. So,
yeah, and I
this
think
is to be expected.
Totally, it is not it's not surprising at all. And also, I hope that ordinary people from the Muslim, Arab, and specifically also Palestinian communities who are watching this will draw courage from this, because I know that they're going to be under a tremendous pressure to not vote for you and either vote for Harris or not vote at all, which we don't agree with that. We think that all people who are angry about the genocide should be voting for you. I just wanted to share also that we had similar things unfolding when we had our council office until December of last year, and one of the last things we did was in November pass one of the first ceasefire resolutions. At that time,
Wow.
it seems unbelievable now, because you have
Yes.
all these Democrats, including Harris, saying ceasefire, but then speaking out of one side of her mouth, and then the next moment sending arms. So it's completely hypocrisy and doublespeak. But at that, there was a time in November when many Democrats were not even willing to say ceasefire. That's credit to the anti-war movement that so much pressure has been built on them. At least they have to engage in just lip service. And at that time, we had, unfortunately, a few of the leaders of the self-appointed community leaders who tried to undermine our resolution at that time. And the reason we won, regardless, despite the opposition by the Democrats and by some of these leaders sort of playing these closed-door rotten roles, is that we had over 500 people show up in City Hall, union members, Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, South Asian Muslims, from my own home country, India. Many people from other ethnicities and nationalities were all there. That's why we won. And I think that's the kind of mass upheaval we need for the anti-war movement.
Exactly. And I think to see Workers Strike Back kind of coming together with Abandon Harris, I think is it's a microcosm of what needs to happen, that we want to bring together, those who are opposed as a moral imperative to the genocide, but also we want to work into that just the really moral imperative around workers' rights, and to oppose the the crushing inequality and the economic inequality and the treatment of working people in this country. And it gives me just really so much hope and inspiration to see Workers Strike Back taking a role in this and working with the anti-genocide community and bringing the labor community. And this was kind of happening at today's demonstration in support of the Boeing workers, but also for the students to be playing a role in that, and for us to be now bridging a connection with the African American community too, which is also really sick and tired of being thrown under the bus.
Absolutely.
Shortly after Abandon Biden came out, there was this this petition from 1,000 Black ministers saying that maybe they should be doing the same thing. And there's definitely that impulse. 1 out of every 3 voters in 2020, or I should say 1 out of every 3 eligible voters, did not vote in 2020. Basically rejecting the zombie political parties and their candidates being rammed down our throats. And the non-voting population tends to be of color, young, and low income. Exactly the kinds of people who are to whom our agenda speaks.
Yeah.
So, we begin to see the makings of a much broader movement, and the ability of the Muslim Americans to really stand up and play this very courageous role completely changes the political landscape. And to some extent, that is starting to happen because the Commission of Genocide, and watching it every day on our computers, is so shocking and disturbing. It's like it's like some shock to the system that has never happened in recent times, certainly not in our lifetimes, to just see this unfolding before our eyes. And it creates all kinds of possibilities right now.
Absolutely. And I want to get to the questions about Boeing workers and also Black working class voters. But before that, you were talking about how it's a shock to the system to see this bloodbath unfolding in front of our eyes. Talk about what your thoughts are. Like now we not only have the genocide in Gaza, we have what's happening in the West Bank, the complete destruction, literally wanton destruction. You see these excavators destroying roads, and apparently 70% of the roads have been destroyed. And now you're seeing all these electronic devices exploding in Lebanon and in marketplaces, hospitals, doctors who are holding these electronic devices have been
many are healthcare workers.
Deeply injured.
That's right.
Yes, exactly, and social service workers. Talk about how you're feeling about all this and what you're hearing from people around you.
What I'm seeing and feeling myself, is that it becomes more horrible by the hour what the Israeli apartheid state is doing. It's unbelievably murderous actions. It's just, it is so beyond the pale that it really compels action. And we put out a tweet, shortly after the pager, the first wave, the pager explosions. We put out a tweet saying that this is it, this is it. It is time for the weapons embargo now. The U.S. has the power to do that. The president has the power to do that. And my feeling is that we as voters have power to do that, because no one is going to do this for us. And the parties of war on Wall Street are not going to do this. However much they pretend to have bleeding hearts on this, they're not going to move here. They are invested in empire, as Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, said back in the 80s. Israel is the unsinkable battleship for the U.S. in the Middle East, basically there to control the supply of this precious resource.
And to quote another politician, Joe Biden, back in the 80s, who said, if there wasn't an Israel, the U.S. regime or the imperialist powers would have created an Israel.
So the U.S. is not going to back away here. They're not going to go quietly into this dark night. And this is, another reason, in my view, that really compels a vote against genocide, because just those votes have huge political consequences. And whether they might tip the envelope, or tip the scales and push the envelope to force the president or Harris, as the candidate to stop the genocide, to stop the bombing now. The hope is that they will, but I'm not holding my breath on this. We have to build power. At the end of the day, we have to build power. And it is going to take us, not only whatever we can do in this race, and I would not rule out a complete black swan event here. That's not to say I'm holding my breath, but on the other hand, there are 3 genocidal candidates that will be on the ballot pretty much across the country. That is RFK, in addition to Harris and Trump. They will be splitting the pro-genocide vote 3 ways. We could be a very unifying anti-genocide, pro-worker, climate emergency vote, and a student debt abolition vote, and a reparations vote, and an end to police violence vote. There are so many critical issues that have huge supporting bases, especially when you consider 1 out of every 3 voters, eligible voters who didn't vote. If they learn that this agenda is happening, we don't know what the numbers will be and what the turnout will be. Whatever it is, and let me just say, in a four-way race, it can be won with as little as 26% of the vote. 26% of the popular vote can win the majority of the Electoral College vote. So don't accept the propaganda of powerlessness. We are powerful, and the more we do the work, the more we turn the crank, the more we're going to turn out the vote. And
I totally agree. I totally agree about turning out the vote. And
yes,
and
that is the bottom line.
Every vote for your campaign is a vote against genocide. Every vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or RFK, who's on the ballot but he's ended his campaign, is a vote for genocide. And that anybody who opposes genocide or says they oppose genocide has to hold the genocide as the red line. I think we also have to be clear that regardless of how much of a vote you get, it's our task to maximize that vote.
It is a victory.
Yes, absolutely. Every vote against genocide is a precious one. We want that because that is somebody taking a stand against the Democrats and Republicans, despite, as you said, all the propaganda, the endless media assault on people, and all the joy and whatever that Kamala Harris, the message, the complete empty vessel message that Harris and Walz are bringing, where there's nothing for working people to gain from it. There's certainly no end to the genocidal war or funding for military funding for Israel from the Harris-Walz candidacy. Neither from Donald Trump. He's also a warmonger himself. In fact, he said he'll double down and quote unquote finish the job. The Republican Party is a warmongering party as well. And so in our view, from Workers Strike Back, we think that maximizing the vote for your campaign is crucial, regardless of what that vote is, because we need to, for the anti-war movement, this is a crucial part of the strategy. And then the other thing, and then we want to talk about Boeing as well, and I think the labor leadership comes in here.
Yes.
I think the other reason why it is so crucial we fight for every vote for your campaign is that the close relationship between the labor leadership, or big sections of the labor leadership, and the Democratic Party is a specific logjam. It is a specific obstacle to building rank and file action, and especially the militant kind of rank and file action that's needed, not only to win victories for the U.S. working class in terms of living standards, but also we are not going to be able to end this war without having work stoppages, nationwide strike actions, all of that. And so fighting against the Democrats and Republicans in the election year is a crucial component, as you've also said, of building that anti-war movement, and especially building rank and file in the labor movement to fight back. And I wanted to share with you that we have now several Workers Strike Back members who get in touch with us. I got an email just last night, actually, from a worker in Olympia who said, I want to bring a rescind Harris endorsement resolution in my union. And because Workers Strike Back has
that's great.
put this idea forward that, and we all have a model resolution as well, saying that if you want to fight for a rescind Harris resolution, endorsement resolution in your union, then join us. We'll help you. And so we have workers doing that because they were not consulted when the leadership of their international union decided to endorse Biden and then Harris. There was no Democratic vote. You saw Workers Strike Back. You were at the Zoom conference where we had a Democratic discussion, and our members voted.
That's right.
To endorse you.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we don't see that happening in most of the labor unions. So I think that's very important as well. That brings me to Boeing. Talk about what you heard from the workers today.
It was so inspiring to hear the workers that they are just, they are moving ahead full speed to stand up for their rights, for their rights to basically security, because working people have been really thrown under the bus, and they are no exception. And their wages have been whittled away at, especially with inflation. They also, their last contract was like 16 years ago. They had some increases that were built in, but they weren't really responding to, the really severely rising cost of living, the cost of rent, and housing in the Seattle area and generally in the Pacific Northwest. Their health care benefits are basically being whittled away. They basically gave up their defined benefit retirement program in exchange for keeping jobs here in the Pacific Northwest. But that was essentially rescinded, so they wound up giving away their secure retirement for nothing. They were, it was kind of a bait and switch.
Yeah.
So they're really furious. Oh, and then also their scheduling and their mandatory overtime. And that is such a huge issue, I think, across the labor movement. The way that work hours are now being scheduled, and it's sort of like work on demand, on the boss's demand. You just have to sacrifice any kind of plan or reliability within your family. This is devastating for people who have young kids.
Completely.
Yeah, it's just awful.
And it's like treating workers like automatons, like you're not supposed to have any family life, you're not supposed to be there for your children.
It was so similar to what we heard from the railroad workers union. The worst thing in their, job situation is this constant grind of being on call to work all the time and basically not having any protected family time.
Jill, you also talked to the wife of one of the Boeing
Yes.
workers there,
Yes.
a wife, Andre, who was talking about how the company does an end run around the family leave, the Family
Yes.
and Medical Leave Act.
Yes, and the details of it, are not nearly so important as the general fact that it's set up in such a way that you basically can't use it. And you wind up basically drawing down on your family and medical leave time. If you're going to use it, you have to spend the whole day on it. You can't just use it for 2 hours. It's just it's set up to fail.
Yeah.
And it just adds to the hardships that families are feeling. And Loda was her name, and their beautiful daughter Natalie, and they were just talking about what a struggle it is for them to just meet their family's healthcare needs without having a regular schedule for Andre, and then just not having any availability for this family and medical leave that they're supposed to have. They just can't access it, and so it's it's just it's outrageous, because we all should have healthcare as a human right, and it is outrageous that has been promised, and then it was a public option, and then the public option got left behind, and then it became bulk purchasing, and then bulk purchasing got whittled down to 10 pharmaceuticals, 10 out of thousands actually, that will actually be delivered by 2026, I think it is. So there's just a healthcare catastrophe going on right now.
Yeah.
Cancer rates are rising, especially in young people, and we know that if you have cancer, the odds are greater than 40% that you will burn through your life savings within 2 years.
Devastating.
And on pharmaceuticals, some 8 million people, that's right, were driven into poverty by their healthcare costs, and it was like 18 million Americans who could not afford their pharmaceuticals, and that includes even with health insurance.
Yeah, and this is the richest country in the world. And
Yeah.
and you at the rally that we did alongside the workers on the picket line, it was really important because you're there as a left pro-worker, anti-war candidate. Kamala Harris isn't there, and Donald Trump is certainly not there. But you weren't just there to shake hands with the workers. You're there, and you're talking about the need for Medicare for all.
Mm-hmm.
I think that really conveyed a powerful message to the workers that this is the kind of working class representatives we need.
Yes.
Who are not just there to glad hand when workers go on strike, but then in the background be in collusion with the bosses and the executives.
Exactly. So we need people-powered candidates and a people-powered party, so that we can stand up for the things that people want and which we can actually provide right now, including health care for everyone as a human right, because our current misleaders, they're being bought off by health insurance, by big pharma. So they can only go so far as the so-called Affordable Care Act, which is not affordable and which does not provide care and which has really hardly budged the numbers at all over the many years. In the same way that why is it that Congress cannot implement a ceasefire? Why does Congress keep appropriating hundreds of billions of dollars here when, in fact, the American people want it shut down right now in overwhelming numbers? Why is that? Well, because they are methodically bought off. They are taking big money from AIPAC and from the war profiteers. Our whole system, this isn't the exception. This is the rule for how it works. This is why everyday people are just, being thrown to the dogs. But at the end of the day, we have the power if we decide to stand up and use it. And that's why throwing out the propaganda that we are subjected to and just saying no to this propaganda of powerlessness and asserting the fact that we are powerful. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. And as Alice Walker said, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. So you put those two things together, and we could actually turn this very oppressive political system on its head right now in this election.
And it was good. It was great. We heard the worker there say that we're not cowering. The bosses better believe this. This is a strike, and workers are determined.
And for me, this was really the first time to be supported at a labor union, because usually, if you're a grain, I don't know what your experience has been. Maybe because.
Well, I think there's a difference. What we saw today is what we always see, which is the rank and file of the labor movement, whose actual livelihoods are on the line, whose workplace experience teaches them that we need to, be in solidarity with other working class people, and we need to fight back. And the kind of candidates we need, kind of elected representatives we need, I think that's different than we were talking about much of the labor leadership, which unfortunately is tied at the hip. With the Democratic establishment.
Yes, and there's been so many struggles that I have shown up to as a candidate to support the hotel workers, and for example, and we're always kind of shuttled to the side, or striking, newspaper workers, whatever strike it is,
the leadership
you're
has
always
a
kind of
stake,
an embarrassment. Because you are actually speaking to their issues, but they don't have the freedom to support you. That's what was so amazing about this rally today. And it's a tribute to Workers Strike Back that you've been supporting the leadership within that labor movement here at Boeing to give people the courage to be able to stand
up.
up.
Exactly. Andre, who's a member of Workers Strike Back, but also a Boeing machinist.
So great.
He's helped build, he's trying to build the machinists for a strong strike, which is really trying to bring forward the strategy that we're talking about, which is a strong strike, and for appealing to the union's international leadership that they should double the strike pay for the workers so that they can stay on the picket line and not have to get temporary jobs just to pay rent. All of that is so important.
And why are they dragging their heels on that,
Exactly. So it's important workers send that message. Last but certainly not least, your Breakfast Club interview. And connected with that is something that you've referenced, very, very important already in this interview, is the Black working class voters and their connection to your campaign and the demands you're bringing up. Can you talk about the Breakfast Club interview? And I just wanted to share with our viewers, if you haven't watched that interview, you should. And at the very least, go to the YouTube of that episode and look at the comment section. It will be heartwarming for you because just thousands upon thousands of many, many Black working class people saying that
I've had it.
I've had it with this Democratic Party.
I'm going out to register green, basically. It's really amazing.
Talk about the interview and talk about the role that Angela Wright played, who's basically a Democratic Party hack.
Yes, she is. Apparently, she was a CNN, talking head who lost her job recently. I don't know what the circumstances are, but she is a known, apologist for the Democratic Party. And I have to say, it was great being on with Butch, my running mate, who is African American and a Muslim American, because he called it out. He called it out right. He said things that I could not say. Basically that these are Black faces in high places here. He said something like, I am personally offended by the use of Black identity here to serve the empire in so many words. And Angela Ray, who I had never heard of, I don't watch CNN, I don't watch the enemy's propaganda. So she came on, all very self-important, that of course we knew who she was and we were going to just roll over with her critique. And she started like reading a list of the elections that I ran in as part of a strategy of building. You don't always win when you run, and sometimes there are other wins besides winning office. But of course, if you're in the oppressive party, if you're in the anti-democratic party, you don't recognize this, and you want to call these out as losses. So she was just reading her laundry list, and then basically I then responded by saying, well, yes, these are the Democratic Party talking points. These are, the talking points of empire and white supremacy, and this is how they basically crush opposition. And she exploded that I was accusing her. Well, she said I was accusing her of being a white supremacist, which I did not. I said, these are the talking points of white supremacy. But she could not get over that. And the whole crowd, I have to say, could not get over the fact that Butch kept mispronouncing Kamala's name. So they were like all up in arms about the pronunciation of Kamala's name, but not about, 200,000 people who've been slaughtered in Gaza. No, we're not going to get upset about that. We're not going to blink an eye. But, Kamala's name, that's not allowed.
Can I just say the Democratic Party politicians in Seattle never pronounced my name right, never bothered to, and also were viciously opposed to the working class agenda. So, it can also go together where you don't give a crap about somebody's name who's supporting working people.
Oh, yes.
Or the working people themselves.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it was a complete joke. Yeah. And what was just so wonderful was to see how everybody got it. I mean, the viewers got it. And I have to say the people in the room kind of got it too, because they sort of stopped resisting after a while.
Yeah.
Because
it was really important actually to see working class people writing comments. And obviously that's a subset of the people who watched and felt the same sentiments, just didn't put a comment that how dare Angela Rice speak for Black working class people, that we've been sold out. And we're not all Democratic Party hacks. We're done with this kind of selling out. Yeah. And we want to fight for something different, something better. And people felt for Jill Stein.
And they felt like they had been so enlightened by Angela Ray, who just sort of lifted the veil.
She exposed herself, yes. And that's
on
very
herself
important.
And on the Democratic Party.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. No, it's not
points.
Just about her personally. She's playing a role to further the agenda of the Democratic Party, of capitalism and imperialism. And her job there was to really psychologically intimidate you guys into submission. And it's important that you didn't fall for that. And in fact, you going there ended up exposing their agenda much more so than it was exposed before that.
And they were shocked. They were completely shocked by that. Charlemagne, I have to say, was friendly, and it sounded like, he wasn't completely friendly, but it sounded like he was being persuaded. And he was actually very kind of inviting afterwards for having continuing contact. So he was quite gracious. Angela Ray just kind of went into some kind of hissy fit.
Just one last thing also what I wanted to say about this is that the other thing it exposed is this whole lie about I don't know what it's called, civility politics or politeness politics or whatever it's called, where this has happened to me all the time, where not just me but other leading members of Worker Strike Back and other leaders of the working class movements that we built here in Seattle, where our defiance and our strategy of exposing the Democrats is always characterized by them, not by working people, but by the Democratic Party hacks, as, you're not being nice to this or that politician, you're not being nice to this or that figure. But it really exposes that this niceness not only does not serve the interests of working people, and and how ridiculous talking about niceness when you have a genocide happening, but it also shows you they're very much not nice.
Yes.
So I think that also came through, which I think was really successful. Jill, we feel so lucky that we had you for a long while. We know that you have just a punishing schedule And so we really appreciate you spending so much time with us. And then it was really great to go out to the Boeing picket line with you. Hopefully, when you're back in Seattle, we can do that if the strike is still on.
Yes.
And then we'll be seeing you on
Yes.
October 6th in
Yes.
Dearborn.
Yes. Oh, that'll be really exciting. Really looking forward to it. And congratulations. I think today's rally was a real tribute to the wonderful work that you're doing, helping to support the really courageous voices of workers who are, they're not only breaking from the from Boeing, but they're also breaking with the constraints of their leadership. And the grassroots really, it's kind of proof of principle of what Workers Strike Back is all about. So I'm really excited about our work going forward.
Absolutely, I really agree with you, and looking forward to help build your campaign alongside you all. If you're able, please join the Boeing machinists on the picket line, which is up and running 24 hours a day at Boeing facilities across the Puget Sound. Reach out to Workers Strike Back if you'd like to go with our members. Over the next few weeks, in addition to supporting striking machinists, On Strike and Workers Strike Back will be actively building the anti-war movement and the strongest possible vote for Jill Stein. If you agree with us, please get active in the fight. Go to workersstrikeback.org and click on Become a Member. Solidarity.